Well, Chris, you made a great analogy just a minute ago about, the magic bullet and the JFK assassination.
Thank you.
Personally, I'm still trying to figure out who is the second gunman on the grassy knoll. But, I see things like this and you see it, bounce up and then fall off a cliff. And how can you explain that, with reasonable or realistic supply and demand fundamentals? I don't know that you can. Keeps getting up to 28 and then tamped down sometimes violently. Why is that such a hard gate to get through?
Wait. What's
What
this,
happens when we
Galen? What
do
are
get
you?
through it?
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on Wednesday, June 23rd, which I think there's an interesting probability that in due history, this could be looked at as quite a fascinating day in the silver markets, where we see another one of these price charts that is almost as exciting as the magic bullet theory from the JFK assassination. And I will give one of my guesses at what could have been happening as silver spiked. What's that? 40 cents higher, looks like there, Galen?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And then something happened with the supply and demand shift, because obviously I'm sure in a honest free market on Wall Street, things would only be matching the needs of the commodity. But fortunately, rather than me guessing, to dig into all these good things today, I have my friend Galen McNamara. I wouldn't say, well, you're a newer friend, although it's been nice getting to know you over the past couple weeks. In fact, Galen, I was driving down to Mexico
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago when we talked. I still picture where I
I
was,
remember.
and Nibbles wanted to do a little break, stop side of the road, sniff around for some silver, and just been nice getting to know you, hearing the way that you approach these things, and especially as the head of Summa Silver and one of the people that the world is going to be counting on to get silver in this increasingly hyperinflationary environment. So welcome on in. How's everything going with you today?
It's going great, Chris, and thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, I do remember talking, and it was a few weeks ago, and you had made off for greener pastures. So it's great to see. I see your background there. You're down in somewhere tropical, and everything looks great.
Yeah, in Chapala, Mexico today, and it's just nice feeling a nice relaxed way of life. The nature has been very healing, and hearing the birds chirp and still being able to, what a fortunate position I'm in to still be able to talk about something I love following and thinking about in the
Yeah.
silver price, and to be able to be somewhere so beautiful. And how about we kick right in? Galen, do you have any thoughts? I know you talk to shareholders, investors, miners, analysts. You see the whole spectrum. You've had quite a bit of success at an early stage in your career, which we can dig into a little bit later. But for all the people who are wondering, they see money printing, they see what's going on, and they see these here 2 days ago, you had the price dip down, then go back higher. What would you tell to someone who's concerned about what they're seeing and wants to know what's going on?
Well, Chris, you made a great analogy just a minute ago about, the magic bullet and the JFK assassination.
Thank you.
Personally, I'm still trying to figure out who is the second gunman on the grassy knoll. But, I see things like this and you see it, bounce up and then fall off a cliff. And how can you explain that, with reasonable or realistic supply and demand fundamentals? I don't know that you can. Obviously, it's something that you've been dealing and digging into for years now, where you just, what dimension are we living in? Is it the twilight zone? I don't know. Where you see these steep drops, and last week was a really frustrating version of one where we got lost a buck plus, and it was very, very volatile. But the way that I look at this is because we have long-term views on where we think silver is going, and it's certainly not $25. That these situations can be very good buying opportunities. Some just some great, just quick chances just to stack up a little bit more, buy a little bit more, whether it's physical or the PSLV, or if you're into mining stocks, long term, that if our theses are correct, that we're probably going to be okay, and we're probably going to do very well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as we were talking about before we hit the record button, the nerdy statistician in me was thinking about, this is really a great example of Bayes' theorem, conditional probability, where if you're look at the things happening in the world, and this is up for each person to decide on their own, of course, but if you think they're just going to keep printing money until all of this eventually gets unwound, or if you think the thing is bankrupt and at some point some sort of reset has to happen, and even though it seems like it's been going on forever, if you look a little bit back in the history that they don't tell you about in your Rothschild's textbooks, 1968, the London gold pool started unraveling for the very same reasons. You came out of the Vietnam War and they wanted to give social programs at home. Not a coincidence. Stop putting the silver into coins. Stopped having the dollar
Yeah,
backed by gold.
that's
So
right.
these things, they take time, but that's why I find if you can take a step back and say, all right, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I see what's clearly building. It allows you to make some different decisions, which is what's actually really interesting about it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And in terms of, where things are building or where things are going, I just get the feeling that, we're probably on the cusp of something here, and something I've had for maybe the last 6 months or so. That, all the people that I listen to, people that are much more informed, like yourself, than I am really. What happens when silver does get through $28? It keeps getting up to 28 and then tamped down, sometimes violently. Why is that such a hard gate to get through?
Wait. What's
What
this,
happens when we
Galen?
do get through it?
What is this? Tamp down. That sounds like I hear inflation is transitory.
Yeah.
Silver price is getting tamped down. Can you explain? I feel like I've heard that phrase somewhere before, but perhaps you could explain what on that one a little bit.
Yeah. So, well, to start, and this whole thing of inflation being what's the term that Powell used, it transitory or something like that?
That's close.
Transitional? I don't know. It makes no
Transitory.
sense. Yeah.
Transitory.
Transitory. I don't know.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Green shoots, headwinds.
Yeah.
There's some great political ones too. Saber rattling. That's one of my favorites.
Right.
But
Right.
continue,
Right.
please.
So, you just go and you look at the price of gas. Okay. Well, that can be volatile. But you look at the price of something like food. And I don't know what the exact statistics are, but in the past year or so, it's gone up substantially, right? And then you're thinking, okay, well, how can that be happening? Well, how many US dollars have been printed in the last 16 or 18 months? It's something like 30% of all supply of US dollars has happened since the beginning, have been put into circulation since the beginning of 2020. You know, how do you avoid substantial and long-term inflation that's maybe scary if those are the statistics? And I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who have similar questions. In fact, I hear what you're saying, although I will call and re-raise. I guess that probably wouldn't have been proper betting format, but as you see here, last night made a video about inflation update. Home prices rose
24%.
24% last year. And Galen, I know that the Fed is not concerned and is talking about the transitory nature of these things yet. I mean, we do have 2 months in a row where it was 4.2% a month ago. Then last month it was 5%. I could double check this. I believe this is a year over year average in the calculation. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Like at some point, it's not a short sample size. But if home prices are up 24%, and you talked before, perhaps before we hit the record button, about a lot of the commodity prices rising, would that suggest that there's a chance that this might not be so transitory?
I think that's the only logical conclusion that a reasonable person could come to. You just look, it's across the board, and sure, there's examples where it's extreme, like in lumber or gasoline or something like that. But there's also places and sectors of the economy that are staple products for everyday people. The best example that I could think of being like food. And then looking at housing prices being up 24%. That's just, those are things that are going to lead to a greater widening between, haves and have nots. And that right there is quite a concern in itself, probably in the not too distant future, just for society in general.
I believe that's what CNBC refers to as green shoots, another exciting economic phrase that oddly von Mises and the other Austrian scholars didn't include in their, outdated,
That is
arcane,
odd.
silly alien hunting theories. But Galen, since you did mention tamp down, which is our special buzzword of the day, and actually in honor, I posted a new clip this morning, which we can dig into that as well. But you also talked about some bizarre activity in the silver price. So here is acting CFTC Commissioner Rostin Behnam, who amazingly enough, he opened a silver investigation on February 1st, one day before the price of silver fell 10%, while the bank's own trust set historical records. And I have multiple silver bullion dealers on statement that said that was the most silver they ever sold in a single day. And they would have sold more if they had been able to handle all the customers who called.
Yeah.
And yet we saw the price of silver fall 10% that day. And then day after the investigation, amidst a lot of fraudulent comments out of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, let's not leave them out too. And yet it comes out months later that despite me submitting multiple rounds of evidence to the CFTC explaining in fashion easy enough that even a lawyer could understand it, we find out at the Boca Raton Futures Conference, Commissioner Behnam says,
and in many respects, the resiliency and the market structure of the futures market really were able to tamp down what could have been a much worse situation in the silver market.
Which certainly didn't seem within what I've understood as the regulator's mandate of regulating a free and fair trading, and he talks a lot about transparency. As someone who has to explain frequently to shareholders and other stakeholders, hey, the price of my thing I purchased has gone up or down, what would you say to that?
That exactly. You use the word free and fair trading of a market, when they're trying to control the price, or the CFTC is trying to control the price downwards when demand is substantially higher, like it was in that situation. That's something else. And let me turn it back to you. The commissioner of the CFTC, do you think he has any friends at banks that may have concentrated short positions in the silver market? Do you think you might know any of those people on a personal or a social level?
Well, I don't think so, Galen. In fact, I can confirm that that is the case because I actually found footage of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan actually voting on this market structure that he's talking about.
Marnie Rosenberg, JP Morgan. Aye. Marnie Rosenberg votes aye.
Right. They take votes and you hear Goldman Sachs, aye, they vote aye. Then JP Morgan, who was fined $920 million, who's being trusted that all of this silver is in place when nobody I know can reconcile the numbers, they're voting on the market policy that this guy just told you was put in place to tamp down the price. What's the fearful outcome? If people are buying silver, the price should go up. That's supply and demand, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, in that case, or just in general, this whole situation, in the best case scenario, we have, and this is to steal an analogy, I think, from Ted Butler, we have the Keystone Cops chasing the Starship Enterprise in the best scenario. In the worst case scenario, we don't have that at all. It's all just window dressing.
Yeah, although fortunately, we don't have to completely guess because I'm going to pull up another interesting clip that I just posted this morning on the channel. And since I'm guessing some people wonder sometimes why I post these shorter clips, what I think is exciting is that there's a lot of other people out there who are noticing, and to the degree that, hey, if people see this, use the footage. But I think investors, companies, that's why I've been sharing the message with people running the companies like you, because you are a stakeholder in this industry. Here's another comment that Commissioner has not commented on publicly, but I found going through the stuff that nobody else watches, and we'll hear what he says here.
We have sort of history and precedent in the future space. We have a match order book, don't have rules. We have T+1 settlement. The clearing infrastructure as a general matter historically within the future space is built in and very strong initial margin, daily mark to market, position limits. All of these things together, I think, really were very effective in managing what was at some point in those few days in late January potentially a challenging situation, and give credit to the exchange for utilizing its authority and some of the tools it has within the margin space to control the sort of the price and the volatility of the silver contracts. To control the sort of the price and the volatility of the silver contracts.
To control the price and the volatility of the silver contracts.
The sort of the price and the volatility of the silver contracts.
Galen, you strike me as someone who's been around the financial markets, investors. Is that price fixing what this man just said?
Well, I know that all investors are theoretically supposed to have equal and fair access to markets that are efficient. And I don't think your average silver investor would have those tools at his or her disposal. So that there's really not much more to say. And the other thing I heard him say that was, I don't want to use the word funny because it's not really funny, but he used the phrase magic order book. What, like what does that mean? Well, we think we know what it means, but it certainly doesn't sound above board.
Yeah, and perhaps another question: how many average investors who purchased gold and silver because they took the time to understand and stand up to a lot of the nonsense, which, we look at the people in the Big Short as like, wow, look at what these guys did. And, if that's the goal, to be able to stand up to the crowd when the crowd is delusional, and the people who took the time to understand what's happening with their savings and went and purchased gold and silver as a response to that, how do you think they should feel? I mean, I don't want you to speak for anyone else, but how does that make you feel that there's a market structure in place? Did you know about this market structure policy? Did they make sure that the people they're serving and protecting were aware of that? Did you know about this beforehand?
No, well, no, of course not. I don't think any reasonable investor could have possibly known about that. And well, how does it make you feel? Well, you've just got to start, it makes me feel awful, as an investor. But it also makes, I hope it makes people, more interested in how much damage can be done when these short positions, these several concentrated short positions are broken. And you know what? Going back through history, there's great examples in other commodities of this happening, right? And I think the most recent one being platinum, where similar type of situation, several concentrated short positions, were unwound. And the people who were short, ended up losing a lot of money, because at the end of the day, these short positions, they need to be rolled over or closed, right? And at the end of the day, right, Tony Soprano wants his money. So if things really start going, these guys are going to be hung in a way that's probably fairly epic. That will make, retail losses so far probably look like child's play stuff. So that's kind of, I like to look at the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And say, okay, well, go throughout history. There's multiple examples of these, these similar situations where there's explosive gains on these commodities. And, I hope we're teeing up for silver to be the next one.
Would you say that in today's environment where, I guess for anyone who still wonders whether these guys crazy saying silver is manipulated, we also have this Basel III thing coming up, which no one who doesn't have a legal degree to even read through the darn thing, which is written by lawyers, which there's a chance they could stop the shorting, could have a dramatic impact on the price. So basically a bunch of lawyers are deciding whether gold or silver should be substantially higher. So in that context, and what you said, Galen, of some other comps, do you think it's possible that silver is it, you're not giving legal financial advice for each person to do their own due diligence. But when we look at what happened with palladium, we had a
Yeah,
similar
there.
situation where people talked about a supply and demand imbalance. And I might add similar JP Morgan confessions, because they admitted rigging platinum and palladium, just like they admitted rigging gold and silver. So is this something that could conceivably happen, a price chart like that, where you go well past the 1980 highs?
I think that could happen, absolutely. And when it does happen, it's going to happen quickly, in my opinion. I mean, I think that there's a real strong chance here that we're looking at 3-digit silver. When, I don't have the crystal ball to say, but, I'm hoping soon. And when that happens, it'll be like all hell breaking loose very quickly, very quickly.
And perhaps, for people who are saying, all right, well, maybe it was easier when silver was $18. Now it's 26, whatever it is. But to me, maybe the real hedge in place is that when you look at what's happening politically, which I understand some people don't want to look at, and is fair enough, but if you're brave enough to dig into that territory, it's like however much money is out there now. Galen, do you see any scenario in which, it's like sometime in the next decade, anyone in Washington or any of these governments is going to say, wow, we really better check this spending? It seems like it's bankrupt, and you're going to have the market reset it, whether there's a planned reset or they just simply have reached the point where they run out of the silver, as the LBMA Zone Silver Report bragged about, and they're very scared. You see the commissioner of the CFTC talked about how scared he was. And again, you wouldn't believe these birds, the things they whisper in the background that I hear, which could be all rumors. And what do I know? I'm not an insider. I'm not an authorized participant to SLV's trust, and I don't go and lie on TV and screw my counterparties and clients behind their backs. So that's a little out of my base of knowledge, and I'll be the first to admit that. But just looking at common sense and seeing we're 28 trillion in debt. I mean, when Baby Bush came in, it was 5. He doubled it to 10. At some point, it doesn't seem so short term anymore.
No, it doesn't seem short term, and that's another whole big picture scary thing. And you know what? When you think about the politicians, what do they have to gain in terms of political capital with the electorate if they stop printing money, if they if they increase rates in any way that's just above a fraction? Their risk for losing power becomes extremely high. And, I think that this, even when you look around the world, and most or all first world nations now, the type of person that becomes a politician, is the type of person that, is doing it as a career politician and maybe has a background. Well, like the guy here in Canada has a background, as a drama teacher and a snowboard instructor where their motivations are, maintaining what they have and maybe not doing what's in the best interest economically for the majority of people who live in their countries. So that's what we're up against. I just don't see a situation, and maybe I'm wrong, where they can really turn off the money printer. So again, it's like this perfect storm brewing for silver and probably for gold, where I want to own as much as I can now. And is it too late to do? No, my feeling is that we're just getting started here, and we're looking at a long-term bull cycle for precious metals.
That makes a lot of sense. And in being fully objective and fair and presenting all sides, would you say this sounds reasonable if someone new to silver said, what's the risk reward profile? That for some people, silver and silver related assets like mining stocks are a terrible investment. For some people, if you're able to be a little street smart, you're willing to dig in when the game is rigged and examine how, if the Sopranos are playing, and hey, the financial markets, Wall Street, as clean as I'd love it to be.
No,
hey, it's what it is. So if you can be a little street smart though, and especially if you can have patience in a cash flow now dominant market, for the people, then there's not many that fit into that category, certainly, but for those that do, would you say that that's where the sweet spot is, and that there is
Sure.
great opportunity if you can know what is actually happening now?
Sure, sure. I think for, someone with a higher risk appetite, to look to some of these mining companies, in bull markets for precious metals and silver bull markets, they oftentimes do exponentially better than the underlying commodity itself. So if you're looking to, spread some risk there, I think that's a good way to do it with, probably a mix of producers and non-producing companies, as well as physical silver and instruments done physical silver, to really get that basket and try to maximize your upside while minimizing the risk a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I guess when you do your homework, you're able to structure things so that can hedge out a lot of those risks. You and I were talking about something I've been thinking about that we'll leave private for now, but perhaps for folks that are hearing what you're saying, and in the sense that I find there's few people that I've met that have a handle on this as well as you do. Usually it's taken them a lot longer in life to figure it out. And you have a bit of an interesting background because you've been quite successful at an early age. And perhaps you could just talk about that a little bit, how that led you to running Summa Silver, and
Sure.
maybe give us a little information on that as well.
Sure. So myself, I'm a geologist by trade. Although, my day job now is the CEO of Summa Silver. So I'm less and less with my hands on the rocks these days. But going back, so taking me back to the start of Summa Silver, even before that, going back to about 2014, I worked for a company called Next Gen Energy, and managed all the drilling for them. And we made some very high grade and large uranium discoveries in Saskatchewan. Left that company in 2018 with the idea of really, I'm an entrepreneurial guy, of, starting my own company, and seeing, what I could do, and if I could really create a win for, myself and my shareholders. So 2018, though, we were going through the desert in precious metals, and I've always been into precious metals. Funny story is that Next Gen was actually my first uranium job. Before that, I was always doing, gold and silver exploration. But like I was saying, 2018, we were going through the desert in precious metals. So, I didn't really need a day job either. So I could really spend my time looking for projects. And I did that, looked at probably, between 100 and 200 properties. And found this project in Nevada, in the historic Tonopah mining district. And Tonopah is like one of these Wild West old mining towns that really helped shape, the identity of the Western U.S. At the very, very start of the 20th century. This camp produced something like 175 million ounces of silver, and almost 2 million ounces of gold, at really high grades of about 1,250 grams per ton silver equivalent. And the thing is, we started looking at this thing, and I thought, well, geez, it's never really been explored. The mine shut down in a big way in the 1920s, but things kind of petered out until about 1950. But after that, it was never really explored, at all. And then so that was part of the property I was looking at. And then I looked right next to that property and thought, well, geez, the extension to this district is totally open and not staked. So I staked that part of it personally, and just thought to myself, well, you know how they say, the best place to find a new mine is right next to the old mine, right? So that was it. I kind of had that realization. Did an option deal and staked the new ground. It did an option deal and included the new ground in the option deal to put it all together. And then a couple months later, vended it into a mining issuer, which I decided to stay on as a CEO. And the rest is history. And that since then we've raised $23 million Canadian. Mr. Eric Sprott has participated for $8 million in total. So he owns 18% of the company, and are now just diligently drilling away on this first project. There's a second project too that I can get to later. But, for me, what cinched this up, when I was looking at it, and it was, 2020, early 2020, and I thought to myself, should we do this or should I not do this? I just kept saying to myself, okay, well, what's an example of a good win here if this goes well?
Yeah.
And I kept coming back to the example of Silvercrest, Silvercrest down in Mexico, Chris. And they went into 2015, 2016, they went into the Las Chispas district with a similar idea, big past production in this area, very high grade and no modern exploration. But you fast forward 5 years for them, and they've done everything well, and they've just done a fabulous job of executing on all levels. But you fast forward 5 years to today, and they've gone from a market cap of 15 or 20 million to like 1.5 billion. So I just thought, that was the final domino that fell, and those are the types of shots that I make.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great things that you mentioned that aren't even specific to just mining, but things that it took me a while in life to learn were just find someone who's doing what you want to do right, and at least not that you copy, but as a starting point, a model, a template. And certainly Silvercrest is a good one to follow in the tracks there.
Yeah, we don't need to try to reinvent the wheel on our companies. Exactly. I like to try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and another thing you mentioned in there that I ask if you could repeat, you said the best place to find silver is find it next to where it's already been found. Can you go through that again? I think
that's an old exploration saying that probably goes back 100 years. And just the way that geology is, it's when you find one deposit of something, whether it be a gold deposit, a silver deposit, copper deposit, whatever, often when you find one, there's more around. Your chances of finding another one in the same area are a lot higher, orders of magnitude higher than going into an area that's completely new where nothing's been discovered yet, even if you have good ideas.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's nice, where it's like you kind of approach things in a certain way. You start putting the math at your side. And I know when people say exploration, there's only a few out of 1,000 that hit. Yet I think that you look at the people who've done it multiple times, there's some common threads and thought processes. Galen, one last thing before, if you have any other shared thoughts on the company, can you talk about the date when you basically closed the deal? Because I think the timing is quite interesting here.
Yeah. I was just looking this up earlier, and we signed the option on this property on March 8th, 2020. So it was right during the original COVID panic stuff. I'm sure everyone remembers.
Yeah, and when we went a little closer in, you were around $17 per ounce. You didn't hit $12 to the day.
I didn't catch quite the bottom. You're right.
Pretty impressive timing, that right before the rebound, before we knew something as silver in the $20. And you could say, sure, there's some degree that maybe you get lucky on the timing of a particular thing, but when you approach things with good processes, you have good partners in place, you do things, with discipline, do you remember to follow up, all these things that a lot of people talk about, and it comes through with the way you present yourself that you've exemplified. And it's really exciting to have you here. Looking forward to following your success going forward. And anything else before we wrap up that you'd like to share with folks?
Well, thanks very much. And the last thing I'll say just about Summa Silver is that we currently have 2 very large drill programs planned for this year. The first one has started, and the second one's about to start within a month and a half or so. We'll drill a minimum of 20,000 meters this year. So it's drill, baby, drill, and lots of news flow coming.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to hearing more about that. I think you have a good plan in place, and sometimes maybe that's the way things guide you, right time and right place. Think it's going to be exciting going forward. Thanks so much for being here today, Galen.
Well, thanks very much, Chris, and great to talk to you.